For this video, I wanted to go through the bonus. So let's go ahead and talk about if statements, and I'll show you an example of how to do greatest common denominator in Excel, but for the bonus, I'll see if you can figure that out yourself with just the example if statement and also understanding how to use loops. Okay, so let's go ahead over to the C++ site that talks about the control structures and loops. And we'll jump down and see what they have to say about if statement and if else, else if. So what we're going to have is if, and then fill in some sort of a condition. And if that condition is true, it'll do one thing. Else, if that condition is not true, it's going to go ahead and do another thing. And you could actually have quite a few of these statements. So you can have if, else if, else if, else if, else. And it's going to be a top-down sequence. So this is order of operations stuff that it will go to the first line, and if the first line is not true, then it'll go to the second, else if, and the third, all the way out to, it's a good practice to have something that kind of catches anything that does not fall into any one of the previous buckets. So let's go ahead over to our compiler, and we'll just create a new project. And for this one, we will play around with if statements, and then we'll put that if statement into a loop. So yeah, we'll try out this in C++. So let's go ahead and start with a comment line, if example. So we'll go ahead and start with what we usually start with. I'm actually going to just copy and paste some things here from another code. So we're going to use our IO stream header because we'll have C out and C in, standard namespace, and here we go for our main program. It's going to start up right here. And for this program, let's say that we want to create a weather app. So it's going to take some temperature reading, and then it will tell the user what the temperature is, and maybe, oh, it's hot outside, so bring ice water, or perfect temperature, or wow, it's cold, better wear your coat, something like that. So it'll take the temperature, and then depending on what the temperature for the day is, it will give some sort of words of advice for what kind of equipment they need for the day. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and declare a variable called temp for temperature, and we'll go ahead and ask the user for the temperature. So we'll say enter the current temperature in, we better specify units here, Fahrenheit. Is that how you spell Fahrenheit? Okay, so here we go. End line, this will bump everything to the next line. So here we have CN, so the user will say what the temperature for the day is, if it's 60 degrees or 80 degrees, right? So then depending on what that temperature is, we're going to give some different messages. So we'll say if, what would be something that's really hot? Maybe larger than or equal to 80. Does that start getting uncomfortable after 80? So if the temperature is larger than 80, then we'll say just something simple. It is hot outside. Okay, end line. And then we can say else, and maybe we want 3 different conditions. We'll say hot, perfect, and cold. So we'll say else if temperature is, so now this will be maybe larger than 65, but less than 80. So anything larger than 80, this first statement will have already grabbed, and then this will get the next tier of it. So we can go ahead and do another C out. So it is perfect outside, end line. Okay, and then the last condition, else. So if this is just going to catch everything that's left. So anything that's less than 65. So we can say it is cold outside. Okay, So here's our input. We have our if statements, and we better end our program with return. So this is ending our program, and this last little curly bracket goes with our main program. I guess we better start our main program out there. So here's our main program is starting. We declared our variables. Oh, it automatically put that in there. So we've declared our variables, we have user input, and then we're taking that input and we're going to tell the user what to expect outside, and then okay, go ahead and save this. I'll just call it temp example, and we'll see if it'll run or not. This is always, oh wow, first try, what do you know? Okay, so enter the current temperature in Fahrenheit. Let's try something that is hot out. So we can say, hey, it's hot outside. So it says temperature is larger than 80, so we're going to go here. Versus if I ran this again and I said, let's give it a different temperature of maybe 70, that's a nice temperature. It is perfect outside, right? And then if we run it one more time, we'll try out this last scenario. So let's say we're up north and man, it is cold outside. Okay, so that is an example if statement. If you want to have multiple things happening inside this if, I can add some more curly brackets. So maybe I want 2 cout statements instead of just 1. So what I can do is just add some curly brackets, and then I can have maybe 1 more output in here, so I can say wear a coat or something. Or I guess this is hot outside. Drink lots of ice water. Okay, so let's try this. So if it's just one line, you don't need the brackets. It'll just automatically jump to that line. If it's more than one line, you can have a whole bunch of different things happen if that if statement comes to pass, and you just have to put it into brackets. Okay, so now if we have something that, ooh, it's 95 degrees out, and we're getting both of those lines out now. Okay, so that is an if statement. Let's try and add a loop onto this. So maybe we don't just want the current temperature. Maybe we're going to get the temperature in the morning and have some equation that will show how that temperature increases through the day. And then for each hour on the hour, we'll report the temperature, and we'll report if it's hot, perfect, or cold. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit more. So instead of the current temperature, I'll say enter the temperature at maybe 8 a.m. in Fahrenheit. Okay, so they're going to give the morning temperature, and then what we're going to do with this, I'm going to have just kind of a little polynomial, second order polynomial, that's going to let that temperature go up and then come back down through the day. So to do that, kind of an ax squared plus bx plus c sort of a thing. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add some more variables here. And I already did this program ahead of time, so this video will be a little bit faster. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and have something with the temp, another variable that will keep track of the time. I'm going to give one that keeps track of the loop, and these ABCs are going to go into my equation that tells me how that temperature is changing with time. So we're going to go ahead and the same thing, the user is just going to enter the temperature, but they're going to give kind of the morning temperature here. So we'll assign that temperature a value, and then once we have that, I'm going to go ahead and create the variables for that little polynomial equation. So kind of the AT squared plus BT plus C. So we're going to have an equation that is going to change that temperature with time. Before we get into the loop, I'll go ahead and report back our starting position. So this will be our starting temperature. So at 8 a.m., that's what they were asked for, right? The time at 8 a.m., the temperature is temperature. So we'll say, and think about as you print this out, you'll be able to kind of mess around with the formatting for these cout statements. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we will have a giant for loop that's going to go around all of these if statements. And I'm going to go ahead and just leave all of these if statements with just one line so that we have less brackets to kind of worry about. And it ends up being quite a lot of parentheses if you have too many things going on. Okay, so here's kind of our original if, else, if, else. And we're going to add a few things onto that. Let's go ahead and just use that beautify button. Is a really nice thing to have. Okay, and this time I'm going to output a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and say if the temperature is larger than 80, that at this time, so we're now going to keep track of the time too, and we're going to update this time. We'll say the temperature is, and this new temperature will be defined by an equation, and it is hot. Okay, so we're going to be outputting a little bit more information, right? And so then if it's kind of the perfect temperature, we can have something very similar. So I'm going to copy in the perfect temperature. Else, if it's super cold, then we'll come over here and we'll change this line up to, it's cold. So this will be if it's less than 65. So we have that same if statement, but we're going to have a couple different things in here. We're going to have a time that will be incrementing in the loop, and we will have a temperature. Okay, so inside, let's go ahead and add in the for loop now. So I'm going to go ahead and increase the time and increase that for loop using this little guy I. And if it's, civilian versus, right, so we could go 11, 12, 13, 14, or if we want this in like, 1 p.m., 2 p.m. or something, that's, so I'm going to have another little variable that will turn this from more of a military time to just a normal time. So if we're after 12 o'clock, if this little counter, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11, 12, and then if it gets up to 13, I'm going to say, oh, if it's 13, then it's actually going to be 1 o'clock. So at 1 o'clock, the temperature is, right, so here's another little if statement that will give us the right time. And I will also have my equation that will define what our temperature is. So our temperature is going to change with time. It's going to change with this loop. So this is like the AT squared plus BT plus C. And the little constants for this equation, and I kind of played around with it to get something that gives a nice little, parabolic curve. So we have negative, it's going to be concave, but this little guy is going to hopefully give us some nice temperatures. Okay, that was a whole bunch to add, but hopefully you can kind of see the structure. So we have a for loop that has some kind of a counter that's incrementing 1 each loop, and we're going to go from like 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. and we're going to loop through changing the temperatures around, all starting from some starting temperature. Let's go ahead and run this, see if it works. Okay, enter the temperature at 8 a.m. So shall this be a nice fall day or maybe a winter day? So maybe we start out in the morning super cold, 60 degrees. Oh, so let the debugging begin. So it doesn't look like it was doing everything in that loop. And that is because we forgot to put in the parentheses. So everything in the for loop needs to be in some kind of a parentheses. So we're going to put in a giant set of parentheses so that everything in here, let me see if I can back out and you can see everything in the for loop. So everything between these parentheses is going to execute from 9 to 22. So we should be able to now get out a lot more lines in this. So let's go ahead and run this again. And we have, let's see, let's start out super cold again. Yay! So now we're looping through. So we start out and it's super cold, and then it's warming up, perfect, perfect, and then maybe it starts cooling down a little bit towards the night versus if we had started it with some other number, maybe we'll start it with like, I don't know, 75 degrees. So 75 degrees, and it's jumping up all the way to like 93, and then it slowly comes back down towards the evening. Okay, so that's hopefully an example of both an if statement, if, else, and how you can take that if statement and put it into a for loop.